What would you do if you discovered your easy job was a front for something deadly? Or if a killer clown trapped you in an empty subway station with nowhere to run? Imagine hiding in the dark only to realize you're feet away from a murderer covered in his victim's blood. These aren't urban legends or creepypasta. These are real events that happened to real people. And tonight, you're going to hear their stories. I'm talking about a lifeguard who stumbled into a money laundering operation and barely escaped with his life. A teenager who survived a terrifying chase through New York City during the 2016 clown hysteria. And two friends whose camping trip turned into a brush with death when they encountered a killer on the run. Each person thought they were safe. Each person was wrong. Before we dive in, if you love true scary stories, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We post spine-chilling content every week. Drop a comment below telling us which story scared you the most. And if you make it to the end, let me know by commenting, "I survived." Now, turn off the lights, grab your headphones, and let's begin with story number 1. October 2016, the clown hysteria. Most sightings were hoaxes. Mine wasn't. This happened back in October of 2016, right when that weird clown hysteria was all over the news. People were posting creepy clown sightings across the country. Most of them were obviously hoaxes or people just trying to get attention. But as you know, there were a couple true cases that were downright terrifying. What happened to me was one of them. I was 16, a junior in high school. I had just finished 7th period, and after saying goodbye to all my friends, I hopped on the 6 train heading uptown. The train was mostly empty, which was kind of unusual, but not unheard of. I wasn't being very attentive to my surroundings. I had my headphones in and I was blasting music. Drake, probably. To make matters worse, I was reviewing chem flashcards on my phone, so I was about as unaware as humanly possible. Never a good idea when traveling alone, but I knew the area well enough to know I'd probably be fine. I was planning to get off at 96th and walk home from there. Nothing unusual, just a regular Wednesday. But things went downhill really fast. We arrived at 96th, and I jumped out of my seat instinctively, barely even looking up to make sure it was the right station. That train ride was something I had done so many times that the routine had become second nature. Getting on and off was like a reflex. With my head still buried in my phone and my music still blasting in my ears, I made my way over to the doors. But as soon as they slid open, I realized out of the edge of my vision that something was obstructing my path. I looked up and realized some guy had stepped directly into the doorway, only it wasn't a normal person. It was a clown. He was wearing the full getup, oversized rainbow pants, a baggy yellow shirt with red suspenders, giant red shoes, and this exaggerated white makeup smeared across his face. Red nose, blue eyebrows, the whole cartoon nightmare. The only thing missing was the wig. I was literally frozen in shock at the sight of him. Not only was I caught completely off guard, but until then I had never been in such close proximity to something so bizarre. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, not trying to get on the train, but clearly preventing me from getting off. I snapped out of my haze and realized I had a good 5 seconds before the doors would close, so I had to do something. I tried to brush past him, but the literal moment I made contact with him, he leaned down in one fluid motion, like he was trying to make sure we were face to face. Before he could grab or restrain me, I sprinted past him, and that's when he lurched forward in an attempt to tackle me. I dodged him and continued running, and he started chasing me. It was terrifying. There was no one else around, and I was being chased by a killer clown. The 96th Street station is relatively quiet in the early afternoon, so I was essentially on my own. I shot a glance behind me and saw him pursuing me. Only his stride wasn't normal. He was running with this jerky motion, like his limbs were disproportionate. But I was much more focused on what was now in his hand. It was what looked like a kitchen knife. I didn't know where he had been hiding it or what his intentions were, but I didn't care. I ran up the stairs and out of the station as fast as my legs would carry me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. The sound of those oversized shoes slapping against the concrete echoed behind me, mixed with this weird breathing sound that still haunts me sometimes. When I burst through the turnstile and onto the street, the afternoon sunlight hit me like a wave. I didn't stop running until I was a full block away. Only then did I risk looking back. He wasn't there. He hadn't followed me onto the street, but I was still pretty shaken up. I immediately pulled out my phone and called the police, my hands trembling so badly I could barely dial. I reported the situation, described the clown, the knife, the chase, everything. They took my statement seriously and sent someone down to the station within minutes. But by then he was gone, vanished, like he'd never been there at all. The police asked me all the standard questions. Had I seen which way he went? Did I notice any identifying features besides the costume? Could I describe the knife? I answered everything as best I could, but the whole experience had been so surreal and terrifying that the details felt fuzzy. Even after talking to the police and being reassured that I was safe, I couldn't get the irrational thought out of my head that he somehow knew where I lived and was going to track me down later. But that obviously didn't happen. In fact, nothing else ever happened at all. I wouldn't be surprised if my story ended up on the news as one of the many strange clown encounters of 2016, though I never actually saw myself mentioned anywhere. For the next few weeks, I took a different train line home, even though it added 20 minutes to my commute. I couldn't bring myself to get off at 96th Street again for months. It took me a few weeks to fully get over this experience. Even now, years later, I still tense up whenever I see someone in a clown costume, even at kids' birthday parties or Halloween. There's something about that blank, painted face and those dead eyes that I can never unsee. Whatever that guy's intentions were that day, I'm just grateful I was fast enough to get away. I once took a lifeguard job that paid $30 an hour. There was just one problem. They specifically wanted someone who didn't speak Spanish. I'm half Mexican. This isn't your typical scary story, but I promise it's worth a listen. I was 2 years out of undergrad when the whole thing started. While I was technically getting an online graduate certificate at the same school I had obtained my bachelor's at, I still had a ton of free time on my hands. During that period of my life, I was jumping around from odd job to odd job, looking for any old gig to fill the hours and help me stack some cash. Let's just say Indeed was my best friend at the time. I was getting tired of door dashing around the same 6 neighborhoods for minimum wage, so I decided a change of pace was in order. As I was browsing Indeed later that night, I stumbled upon something intriguing. It was a private lifeguarding job at a hotel a few towns over. There were a couple of strange details in that listing that gave me pause. First of all, the hours were backward. They wanted someone to operate and supervise a swimming pool from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. during the week. It was basically a night shift for a pool. That wasn't the strangest thing, though. The requirements explicitly requested an individual who didn't speak Spanish. Let me repeat that. They specifically wanted someone who didn't speak Spanish. Here was the problem. I've been speaking Spanish since I was a little kid. I'm literally half Mexican. The town the hotel was based in was predominantly populated by Spanish-speaking Americans, too. There was one thing I was feeling pretty good about, though: $30 an hour. Safe to say, I disregarded all the other nonsense and decided to focus my attention on the compensation. I decided I'd just pretend not to know Spanish. What were they gonna do? I heard back and was invited to interview within a few hours. Fast forward to the first day. I pull up to the hotel and everything looks exactly how you'd expect. This pudgy Mexican-looking dude comes out to greet me, and the two of us exchange information and have a laugh. He was actually really friendly and pretty funny too. His amiable demeanor put me at ease a little. But as we were walking into the complex, this other taller guy turned a corner and started staring me down. I could tell right away that I was being profiled. The second guy walked right up to me and started communicating with me in Spanish. He didn't smile, didn't say hello, shake my hand, nothing. I instantly knew what he was doing. He was trying to gauge whether or not I knew Spanish. I gave him a blank stare, even though I understood every word. After a few seconds, the two of them burst out laughing like they had both been in on some practical joke. The taller guy flashed a smile, outstretched his hand, and said he was just messing with me. He introduced himself as Ramon and the bigger guy as Miguel. Ramon started talking me through the job. According to him, they needed someone to work later hours because they wanted to increase revenue, and they were going to start charging non-guests just to use the pool. My responsibilities were as follows. Lifeguard, obviously. Collect money from non-guests trying to enter the pool. Call Ramon if there was any sort of problem. And there was one more thing. Ramon told me that if anyone showed me a blue wristband, I was to let them into what he called the pool house, which was a huge building behind the lifeguard stand. The first few weeks were really chill. A lot more people used the pool than I was expecting. The first time someone showed me a wristband was about a month in. This buff Hispanic guy in shades and a white button-down shirt walked up to me, clearly not knowing a lick of English. He showed me his wristband and I unlocked the pool house. About an hour later, he emerged. His backpack looked significantly more full than it had when he arrived. Over the next few weeks, more and more people started showing me wristbands. More non-guests started using the pool too, because I began collecting a lot more money than I ever had. At one point, I realized I was actually collecting too much money. People entering the pool would overpay me by a crazy amount on a consistent basis. I called Ramon about it, and he told me not to worry. I could tell he didn't want to talk about it because he hung up the phone while I was mid-sentence. That short phone call confirmed to me that I was involved in something more than just lifeguarding a swimming pool. My mind started racing until there was a single thought I couldn't purge from my brain: money laundering. I didn't know what to do. On one hand, my intuition was telling me I was involved in something illegal and should get out immediately. But on the other hand, I had no safe way of confirming that suspicion and didn't want to forfeit $30 an hour over nothing. So I kept my mouth shut and kept the job. A few days later, I actually had to rescue a drowning child. It wasn't anything overly heroic, just a kid who strayed too far into the deep and clearly couldn't swim. But when I returned to the surface of the pool, everyone gave me a standing ovation. After that, Ramon actually came down from wherever in the hotel he had been and thanked me personally. He said he owed me his life, which I didn't understand until I realized the kid I saved was actually his son. The next day, Ramon, Miguel, and a bunch of other dudes were all waiting at the gate to greet me with a glass of wine. After everyone toasted me, one of the men made a toast in Spanish. He was basically toasting all the money they were making and all the lives they were destroying, whatever that meant. Everyone laughed and drank, but that was the moment that made me realize I had gotten involved in something seriously insidious. The next day, my mom called me while I was at the pool. My mom, rest her soul, never called me unless it was something really important, so I had to answer. I got down from my stand and went over to what I thought was a private little alcove. My mom only ever spoke Spanish, so naturally I had to talk to her in Spanish. After hanging up and turning to head back to the pool, Miguel was standing directly in my path, staring at me. He did not look like that same friendly guy I had met on my first day. After a really awkward pause, he asked how long I knew Spanish. I played dumb, saying I was just practicing it with a friend and wanted to learn, but I knew he saw right through me. He just kept staring at me like he was contemplating something. My heart started racing and I felt like he was debating whether or not to harm me. Eventually, he just said, "Okay," and turned around. I immediately went right back to my post. I debated leaving, but couldn't force myself out of the chair. A few minutes before my shift ended, Ramon came up to me and told me to arrive an hour earlier the following day, as he'd have a new opportunity to offer me. Then he tipped me a couple hundred and walked back into the hotel. When I left the hotel that day, I never returned. No way. That situation had no good ending. For months after that, I was a paranoid wreck. Every van or suspicious-looking car on my street freaked me out. Even after all these years, there are things about it I don't understand. I still think I was really close to losing my life that day. The way Miguel was glaring at me, there was one thing on his mind and one thing only. I hate camping. Always have. But when you're a teenager with a wilderness-obsessed dad, you don't get a choice. This happened many years ago. I've never liked camping. I'm just not built for it. The dirt, the bugs, the uncomfortable nights in a sleeping bag that somehow always end up feeling like a rock by morning. Unfortunately, I've been camping more times than I can count, though never by choice. My dad is one of those rugged, wilderness-loving types, and every summer when I was a kid, he dragged me out into the woods with his equally rugged friends to disconnect from technology and reconnect with nature. By the time I hit sophomore year of high school, I'd had enough of suffering in silence. I finally convinced him to let me bring a friend along to make the whole thing a little more bearable. To my surprise, he agreed without much fuss, so I brought my friend Tyler from school. Now, you'd think bringing Tyler would have made it worse, considering he was a hardcore Boy Scout back in the day and actually loves camping, but Tyler was cool about it. He teased me for hating it, but he wasn't one of those "you're not a real man if you don't love the outdoors" types. Plus, I figured if I had to suffer, at least I'd be suffering with someone who knew how to make a fire and pitch a tent without turning it into a full-blown disaster. Unfortunately, the trip didn't go as planned from the start. It turned out that one of my dad's friends had messed up the campsite booking. Instead of some remote, peaceful spot deep in the woods, we ended up at this crappy, overdeveloped campsite. I'm talking indoor bathrooms, paved walkways, and even a playground for little kids. It wasn't camping. It was basically glorified backyard living, or glamping, I guess. To say my dad was upset would be an understatement. We didn't even discover the worst part until a few hours later. Right next to the campsite was a mini amusement park. I'm not joking, an actual amusement park with carnival games, a Ferris wheel, and a handful of roller coasters. It's surreal. Those two settings were never supposed to collide. Everyone was pissed. My dad and his friends grumbled about how this wasn't real camping, and Tyler wouldn't shut up about it either. The whole situation sucked. We had driven hours out to the site. It wasn't like we could just turn around and leave. So, with no better option, we made the best of it. Tyler and I were sharing a tent, and once everything was set up and dinner was done, we slipped away for a bit under the excuse of organizing our stuff. The truth was, Tyler had brought a little metal pipe and some weed in an old Altoids tin. Nothing crazy, just enough to take the edge off. We snuck into the woods and smoked, chuckling to ourselves the entire time. After a few hours of just chilling and talking about some of our other friends from school, we both agreed that we had way too much energy to sleep. Tyler had a very mischievous grin on his face, and I could only imagine what he was thinking. He suggested we go explore the amusement park, which instantly piqued my interest. He said it would probably be a piece of cake getting to the top of one of those roller coasters. After we were sure everyone was asleep, we made our move. It was really late by then, well after midnight. We grabbed our flashlights and headed to the fence surrounding the park. It wasn't even that hard to climb, just a little boost from Tyler and we were in. The place was dark, but there were security guards patrolling. Every so often, we'd hear the hum of a golf cart making its rounds. It felt like we were in some kind of stealth video game, sneaking around and trying not to get caught. We progressed through the park slowly, ducking behind buildings and keeping an eye on the patrol. We finally made it to the base of the roller coaster, and from up close, it looked way bigger than it had from the campsite. We spotted the maintenance stairs running up alongside the main ascent and didn't hesitate. The metal rungs clanged softly under our feet as we climbed one step at a time. There were no railings for part of the stretch, which was actually kind of terrifying. We finally reached the top, and the view was unreal. We could see the entire park below us. Eventually, we figured we'd pushed our luck long enough and decided to head back. The return route was much quicker. We were maybe 5 minutes from the spot we'd hopped the fence when we had to stop. One of the guards was making a round in a golf cart, so we had to quickly duck behind a snack shack and wait for them to pass. That's when I noticed something move in the dark. At first, I thought maybe I imagined it, but then Tyler tapped my arm and pointed in the same direction. About 30 feet away, just barely visible in the darkness between two buildings, was another person. They were crouching down just like us, like they were also sneaking around and trying to avoid the guards. It didn't look like a kid, though. The worst part was that I was fairly confident they were looking directly at us. Between the patrolling guards and now this, the situation was getting overwhelming. As much as we wanted to, we still couldn't move. The guard hadn't passed yet. I kept my eyes glued to the figure, and they actually started moving. They darted across a patch of open ground and right through the little spill of light coming from a nearby street lamp. For a split second, I saw him clearly. It was a man. He was wearing tattered clothing and had this really awkward stride like he was injured or disfigured. But none of that was as unsettling as the dark liquid smeared across his face. It looked like blood. Tyler saw it too, and the two of us exchanged a really terrified look. Eventually, the man ducked out of sight. The guard finally passed us, and we kept moving. We didn't say a word as we made our way back to the fence. I kept checking over my shoulder every few seconds, convinced we were being followed. We made it back to the fence, scaled it, and dropped down on the other side. This time, we didn't laugh about it. All I wanted was to be back in the safe confines of our tent. By the time we made it back, neither of us brought up sleeping. We just lay there trying to make sense of what we'd seen. The next morning started off normally. We got up, had a bite to eat, and started packing our gear to go fishing. But around 10 a.m., one of the camp staffers came around to our tent site and gave us an announcement. Apparently, a man had been stabbed and killed the night before at a lake about 4 miles from the campground. The guy who did it was still on the loose. They described him as a disheveled white male in his late 30s, shirtless, possibly bleeding or with blood on his clothes. Then they instructed us to pack our things and leave for our own safety. Tyler and I instantly connected the dots. It must have been that guy we had seen the night before. We kept our mouths shut. We didn't tell my dad, we didn't tell the Rangers. I still kick myself for not speaking up. I'm still close with Tyler. This experience is something we don't often talk about, though. I think it's crazy that my friend and I were mere feet away from a murderer on the run.
So there you have it. 3 terrifying true stories that prove sometimes reality is far more horrifying than fiction. A lifeguard who realized too late he was working for criminals. A teen who barely escaped a knife-wielding clown in broad daylight. And 2 friends who came face to face with a murderer and lived to tell the tale. Each of these people made split-second decisions that saved their lives, and each of them will never forget what they experienced. The scariest part? These things could happen to anyone. That job that pays too well, that strange encounter on public transit, that unexpected moment when everything goes wrong. We never know when ordinary life will take a dark turn. If these stories gave you chills, smash that like button. It helps us bring you more terrifying content. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our weekly uploads. And seriously, drop a comment below. Which story terrified you the most? Would you have survived these situations? Have you experienced something similar? We read every single comment. Share this video with friends who love scary stories and check out our playlist for even more true horror. Remember, these aren't just stories, they're warnings. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your eyes open.